48 hours after moving into his first apartment, Ethan vanished. There were signs of a struggle and blood on the walls, but despite the locked doors, the police found no physical evidence of an intruder and no trace of Ethan. The only lead left behind was a recording on his phone. 3 distinct knocks, then a silence that ends with a scream. Just before the recording ends, at exactly 2:17 a.m., Ethan sent one final text. "It pretends to be alone until you answer the door." Ethan wasn't looking for trouble. He was a typical college graduate who took a chance on a cheap rental in Denver, unaware that he was stepping into a very specific kind of trap. Looking at the timeline, it's clear this wasn't a random incident. Ethan's disappearance followed a sequence of events that had been refined long before he arrived. Recognizing these steps as they happen is the only way to see the threat before it's too late to lock the door. The landlord's only rule was simple: if you hear knocking at night, ignore it. It wasn't a suggestion, it was the only piece of advice that actually mattered. At 2:17 a.m. on his first night, Ethan heard those 3 knocks. Curiosity got the better of him. He opened his bedroom door to find a completely empty apartment. This initial contact is a probe. It's testing to see if the person inside will follow the landlord's warning. By opening the door, Ethan broke the one safeguard he had, effectively inviting the knocking to move into his private space. The entity relies on that basic human impulse to check a noise. It needs the victim to actively bridge the gap between outside and inside. Ethan's neighbor, Mrs. Green, confirmed that he wasn't the first person to experience this. The apartment had a history that the landlord hadn't fully explained. Before Ethan moved in, 3 other tenants had signed leases and fled within weeks. By repeatedly terrorizing the occupants of that specific unit, the entity ensures the room stays in a state of constant turnover. This constant rotation ensures that no one stays long enough to warn the next person. It keeps the target isolated, surrounded by neighbors who have learned to mind their own business. It creates an environment where, by the time a tenant realizes they're in danger, there's no one left to believe them or help them. On the second night, the threat moved into the bedroom. The knocking wasn't coming from the hallway, it was coming from inside the closet. The entity began to mimic a human voice, pleading from behind the wood. It was an attempt to make Ethan lower his guard by appealing to his sense of empathy. Just as Ethan reached for the handle, his phone rang. It was a sensory distraction, a sudden noise meant to pull his attention away. The voice on the phone whispered a warning to stay still, but it was already too late. As he turned his head, he realized the figure was already standing directly behind him. The voice in the closet and the ringing phone worked in tandem. They were timed to draw Ethan's eyes one way, so he wouldn't see the real threat until it was inches from his face. Now, a detective stands in the same room, looking at the same blood-stained walls and trying to make sense of a locked room disappearance. But as he picks up the phone to call it in, 3 knocks echo from the closet door. The sequence is starting over. There is no evidence to collect that can stop this. The only protection that ever existed was that first simple rule Ethan chose to break. It's a reminder that our homes are only as safe as the boundaries we keep. Once you invite the noise in, a deadbolt won't help you. If you're at home tonight and you hear something at 2:17 a.m., don't look, don't answer, and whatever you do, count the knocks.